Hey folks, welcome back to this series of recaps from the 2024 National Open, which took place earlier this month in Las Vegas, Nevada. Here I'm going to be reviewing my round 4 game against FIDE Master Doug Eckert. So going into this game, I was on 1.5 out of 3, so an even score, but I did just lose my third round game, kind of in an unfortunate way, against Grandmaster Schwertz. So going into this round 4, I was definitely looking to bounce back here with a win. And I'm playing, like I mentioned, FM Doug Eckert. I actually know Doug. He is local here from St. Louis, and we've played multiple times over the years. So I'm quite familiar with his game. And we've played an English opening a couple of times already, and I know he's has a lot of experience in these structures. He's been playing them for many years, so I definitely knew going into this that it was going to be a very, very tough game. So c4, I go g6. I like this move order because I'm going to usually play King's Indian, but I'd rather be flexible and not develop the knight to f6 super early. And when white goes for a typical English setup, I usually just play the symmetrical English. And this is what we get: knight f3, knight c6, knight c3. I play d6, and here black delays knight f6. Of course, I think this is very playable, but the idea is not to let white play d4 super easily. So that's why d6 comes first, to keep the square under control. White castles, and now I play this move bishop f5. So I usually play the move e6 in this position, but okay, I imagined Doug had something prepared for this one because I'm pretty consistent in playing this. So I wanted to switch it up for this game, and black has a lot of setups here, and so I decided to try this one. I know this is pretty reliable and has been pretty popular over the years, and it made sense to me in like the 20 minutes or something that we had to prep for this game. So my idea here is to play queen to d7. This is the idea of the line, and then go bishop h3 and trade off the bishops. So white plays h3 pretty quickly. So I imagine this was still Doug's preparation, or something he had seen before. The idea now is to me queen d7 with king to h2, and then the battery doesn't really do a whole lot. But here I switch plans a little bit. I go e5, and now we get this kind of like reverse Botvinnik setup where the knight will go to e7, and the bishop on f5 doesn't actually make a ton of sense, but it will often drop back to e6 where it does stand well, and then black can play for d5. And then the nuances of playing bishop f5 and then back to e6, I really don't understand. This is just something I checked with the engine before the game, to be honest with you guys, and like it said, e5 is perfectly fine. You go knight to e7, bishop drops back to e6, and then the lost tempo for whatever reason doesn't matter too much. So I haven't really investigated this one too deeply, why black can't just play like e5 here, for example, and then bishop e6. I'm sure there's some concrete reasons. But anyway, so this is what we got: bishop f5, h3, I go e5, d3, knight e7, a3, and now I think we get a pretty typical English kind of position. Castles, white goes rook to b1, I played a5, and yeah, I think this is quite reasonable. I think black is totally fine here, so I was overall pretty satisfied with the result of the opening. So bishop to d2, white is kind of preparing this b4 advance, which is very typical plan. I went bishop to e6 here, and I think I was actually in my book up until this moment. This is just like a random line I had analyzed, and we'd happened to go into it. Here my opponent goes knight to g5, bishop to c8, and I was a little worried, that he's just going to go back knight f3, where I think black's best move is probably just like bishop e6, but okay, I was going to think about how not to repeat, but anyway, it didn't have to come to that because white goes knight to b5. And here, yeah, I'm definitely on my own, so I started kind of thinking for real for the first time. And already the position actually is, very complicated. To start, white is threatening, I believe, knight to e4, and then just taking the pawn on d6. So that was definitely something I had to deal with. And quickly I realized, f5 is probably going to be the move that I want to play here, which is just a logical move in this structure, covering the e4 square, gaining space on the king side. I looked for other moves, but I didn't really see anything that I liked as much, so I did end up just going f5 after about 5.5 minutes here, just making sure I'm not missing any tactics with bishop d5 check or anything like that. I think the engine actually likes to move knight to d4 in this position, which I don't know how much I consider this one. Of course, the idea is to try to trade off the knight. So if white takes, then black will probably take with the c pawn here. And yeah, apparently black is absolutely fine. I'll play h6, maybe even get d5 in at some point. And yeah, I would agree with the engine. I think black is all right. But yeah, this move just wasn't on my radar. And as we'll see in this game, actually, I missed this move in a couple of positions. Just this idea of playing knight to d4. I was often not sure how to evaluate the exchange of knights. So f5, white goes b4, and I take once, a takes b4. And here, I believe white's idea, of course, was to try to give up the bishop in order to get me to take on b4. Rook takes b4. And I thought that this was a nice structure for white during the game. Of course, after the game, I realized that I'd missed that in this position, I can go knight c6. And so if not for knight c6, then white would be doing kind of all right. You know, this pawn on b7 is weak and so on. But knight c6 actually is just a brutal double attack that just wins the game. And yeah, I totally missed this. And I think I wasn't expecting my opponent to kind of like hang a pawn, because I think he didn't see it until it was too late either. But yeah, apparently I could have actually just taken this one. And then if cb4, probably white doesn't take back right away, that's losing, but they have to kind of play around the pawn and then try to win it back. So that's not easy to do. So in fact, I think knight takes b4 is the best way, according to the engine. And then after bishop takes b4, otherwise I just come back, it's clean pawn up, c takes b4. And then again, if rook takes b4, black has this trick with knight c6 that, you know, just wins. So white has to do something else, like queen b3, for example. And then black can go like h6 and then knight c6. And feels like, yeah, we hold on to the extra pawn, and white will have to work hard to win it back. So that definitely felt like a missed chance. And yeah, I just didn't realize that I have this knight c6 with tempo. And at this point, I'd already been spending some time. Like I spent 12 minutes on ab4, so I was, you know, trying to get into the position and figure out what to do. But yeah, I just missed this this tactical nuance. So instead I go h6, which, okay, is logical, kicking back the knight. And now I go g5, starting to advance on the king side. And white takes on c5, dc5. Maybe I shouldn't have allowed this one. I was thinking maybe b6 would be more solid to go b takes c5, but I think ultimately it is kind of okay for black. So g5 takes, bishop c3. Here I think the game continues logically, knight to d2, queen to d7, king h2, knight g6, and rook a1. And now I played h5, and okay, I mean, my idea is to push on the king side with h4, try to open up white's king, but I realized like I kind of underestimated an opportunity here for white, and luckily my opponent didn't go for it, but he could have traded rooks on a8, and after rook takes a8, play this move e4, which I saw before I played h5, but I didn't actually realize that this was quite strong for white, because I had assumed that I could play f4 here and everything would be fine. But actually white can definitely get away with taking this pawn. And so in my mind, I was thinking like, oh, I have king f7, rook h8. If white takes here, for example, then like bishop f6, rook h8. And yeah, I thought black is completely winning here. And I think that's correct. Like bishop takes h3 is coming, and it looks like black is giving mate. But on king f7, white can go knight f3, which I didn't really calculate ahead of time. And then this is hanging with check now, and that's a big problem. So yeah, apparently like this is still working for black. I'd have to find rook h8, takes, king g8, takes, rook h6, and then white's queen ends up trapped. But white can get a ton of material with like queen takes e6, for example, take, and yeah, we get some position here. Let's put this on the board where white has rook and bishop and 2 pawns for the queen. So more than enough material, and this like immediate way to get into the d5 square for the knight. So here I think white is probably still having a clear advantage, but anyways, I don't think if we even got to this point, I'm not sure, because at this point I saw king f7, knight f3, so I don't know if I would have gone into this whole line. Probably bishop f7, I think at this point is maybe the more human move, with the idea like queen takes g5, I can take on d3, and then the position at least is complicated. Though I think white is doing well here, something like takes, queen takes e4. But I think black is kind of surviving. At least it's messy. But anyways, the point is I didn't really evaluate all of that before playing h5. So like white could have just taken, gone e4, and it's very unpleasant because with e4, not only is white threatening the h5 pawn, white is also threatening this just positional threat of e takes f5 and knight e4, which is perhaps an even larger threat. Like if I go g4, just defending the pawn, takes, white can throw in a check or go knight e4. Let's say check first, and then king somewhere, knight e4. Positionally, black is just busted here because it's just way too many weaknesses. And yeah, all of white's pieces have beautiful squares. My attack is not really going anywhere. My pieces are, I mean, yeah, it's just everything is in white's favor in this position. Engine says it's like lost. It's like over +2. I don't know if I would say it's like lost, you know, in human terms, but it's clearly very bad. So yeah, instead of h5, I think knight d4 actually again could have been very, very playable here. And this is one of the moves that I kept, I think, misevaluating, yeah, throughout the game, because my assumption is that if white could get this kind of Benoni structure, white would be pretty happy, you know, having traded off a minor piece. But yeah, I think actually, okay, looking at it now, it's really not that bad because black will get counterplay with bishop e5, f4, h5, and so on. So this position, I think, is actually more or less balanced. During the game, I was thinking black is kind of like a little bit worse here, but I don't think this was this was definitely underestimating the position. So h5, white goes knight b3. Luckily for me, he doesn't trade rooks. b6. Now I think black is doing okay again because this e4 isn't as strong without the knight on d2. Queen to d2. And I played bishop f6, you know, just like building up the attack. I think I'm hoping for h4 and maybe even lifting some heavy pieces to the h-file. But yeah, actually I should have just played f4 here. And I really wasn't thinking about this one a lot during the game. Strategically, it feels off because it gives up the e4 square. But black has ideas of just taking and then playing h4 and creating some problems for white on the dark squares. So actually, this is probably the way to go, and I think white is under some pressure here. Probably he should trade rooks to get my rook off of the f-file. Otherwise, I would trade and then take and then use the f-file. And I think Engine is saying like e3 is maybe the best move here for white. Not a super easy move to find. Maybe rook to d8 and putting some pressure, and things are complicated. If not this one, then black is ready to go like knight d4 again and try to get that e5 square for the dark square bishop, or take h4 and then try to get the f4 square for the knight, which is also quite promising. So yeah, f4 definitely the way to go, but bishop f6 a little bit too slow. Now white trades rooks. He goes rook to a1, and at this point I'm already starting to face issues, I thought, because generally I should probably trade rooks here. I don't want to give up the file, but I was thinking if I take bishop takes a1, his queen is getting to the a file first. He's going to get queen a6, and again I was pessimistic about this position, and again I was wrong, because like it actually turns out the position is fine. Knight to d4 again, and bishop takes d4, ed. I really just misjudged all these positions, but here black is playing f4 or h4, bishop e5. So for example, queen a2, f4, queen a6, let's say the bishop can come back to d8. This is a little bit awkward, but we kind of see these ideas in like the Sveshnikov, Kalashnikov, these kinds of openings. And in the meantime, black is ready to take, again, go h4, try to get the knight to f4. And it's complicated, but yeah, it's not really clear that white is breaking through on the queen side like I thought he would be. So it turns out maybe black is the one with the advantage here. So yeah, I was not loving that position. I ended up going rook to b8, not really happily, because I understood that this is very, very risky. Now white can bring the rook in, and of course my rook is passive, his rook is active. I mean, it's not a good situation. But the idea was to just try to keep more pieces on the board and to hopefully one day be able to use the rook on the h-file, without which, you know, I felt it would be hard to create an attack. But yeah, this is quite optimistic because it's really a difficult situation for black. Now after rook a6, white is turning knight takes c5. So this is a problem, so I have to go knight g7 and start defending the queen side. Queen to b2, and white's play here is very simple. Now white just has the dream English, you know, the pawn on e5 is a big target. This is a target. White has the a file, he can try to come in. The bishop on g2 is obviously very, very strong here, and my attack is still not going anywhere, and it's hard to see what I can do. G4 always met with H4. H4 white can take, and I'm not really opening up a lot of lines. So I played king f7. I think this is making things worse. Probably bishop f7, just staying solid. Maybe G4 somewhere, and black I think is at least holding on, though we're definitely worse. I played king f7, knight to d2. And now the idea is probably to try to get knight f3, put pressure on these weaknesses. So definitely I had to just go g4 here, for better or worse. It allows white to close the king side with h4, but at least the knight isn't going to be killing me. And yeah, game continues. And at this point, you know, I do need to just be very, very satisfied with the draw, which is hard to do when you're playing down in an open tournament. You're always trying to keep your winning chances alive. And it's hard to say when it's when it's the right time to really just try to shut it down. But at this point, I think, yeah, I really need to just be trying to limit the damage. Anyways, I went h4, but now takes, I take, and queen a1. White has other moves as well, like f4, for example, was also possible. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do here. I think like knight g6, I think I have to just sack this pawn, bishop to g5, and just play around it and hope for the best. Hope for some complications. I didn't really believe in it during the game. I think Engine doesn't really believe in it either. Instead, queen a1 is also completely reasonable, just keeping the a file under control, looking to infiltrate at some point. Now I played queen to d8. I really don't have a lot of moves here as black. I'm just kind of trying to hold on, maybe preparing bishop to c8 here at some point, or to bring the queen over to the king side. But now knight to f3, and now, yeah, things are starting to hang. Finally, I played knight to d4. I realized, okay, I have to make this move. It's not really a great moment to do so, but anyways, white takes. I think this wasn't even white's best try here. Like even e3 is perfectly good, forcing me to take, bishop takes, and okay, the bishop comes to h. It's a little bit complicated because d pawn will be hanging, but so will the e pawn. And yeah, black's king here is extremely, extremely vulnerable. Queen g1 and so on. So this is very, very dangerous for black as well. But the way Doug played it, bishop takes, I thought was simple. Now I went e takes d4, which was the correct way to take back in all like the previous positions that we were looking at. But here, it actually just weakens the king side too much. I think c takes d4 was what I had to do. And here, this is a nice Benoni for white. I think white is doing quite well. I would probably play queen to c1, just looking to get in, take control of all these squares. Maybe I got to go like king to g6 here as black's try and defend with the king. And white is happy. I mean, I think white just has like a kind of dream Benoni here. It's not game over, but for example, e3 looks like a nice move. If takes, queen takes. And yeah, white's pieces are very, very active here, and I'm just holding on by a threat. I mean, my king is like participating in the defense, usually not a great sign. Anyways, that was the best I could do at this point. But e takes d4, you know, I'm just hoping for some check on the diagonal at some point. But queen to c1, and now this is a real problem because queen f4 and queen h6 are big threats. And this is why e takes d4 is bad, is because it gives up this f4 square to white's queen. And at this point, I think black's position is just kind of busted. Maybe king to g6 was the best try, queen f4, and then I'm losing. You know, white is about to just start collecting stuff. The engine gives the move rook a8, which I think I just did not really consider, because there's all these like checks on the diagonal. Like you're thinking takes, knight g5, you lose your queen, but it actually doesn't work because knight g5, bishop takes g5, and white's queen is hit. So surprisingly, rook a8 is actually playable, and there's no immediate loss here. But anyways, after queen h6, queen f4, this is very unpleasant. That said, this was 100% the only way to keep the game going at least somewhat longer. Instead, I play knight c6, but now queen h6, queen to g8, and struggling to remember what I was even hoping for here, because there's a lot of good moves here for white. I mean, white found the simplest, just knight takes h4, just grabbing this pawn. And unfortunately, I don't have any good moves, like bishop to g5, then white just goes queen h5 check. And yeah, everything is collapsing. The knight on c6 is hanging, and there's like knight d6 and knight c7 and so on. And so this is all bad. We're just losing material. So I tried this check, but now f4, queen to h8, And yeah, I'm hoping for, you know, queen takes h8, bishop takes f4. That was my one kind of trick in the position. Otherwise, white's winning a piece, because any way I take back, c6 is going to hang. So white is going to be taking 1 or 2 pieces here. But I could take on f4 and then take on h8. And so this would actually, here the game would actually be unclear. Maybe I can save it. Material is all of a sudden equal. So of course I was hoping for that, but white has queen g6 check, king e7. And now there's many ways for white to win. I was definitely hoping to see knight takes f5, which is good. It's tempting, but at least the game I thought would continue. I can take, and go rook f8. And I think white has to go queen g5 check. And then I was thinking like bishop f6. And white is winning, but at least I thought, okay, opposite color bishops. I haven't lost the piece yet. But white is winning here if they find all these moves, which is likely. But I thought at least that is the best I can hope for at this point. Instead, though, my opponent played f takes e5, which is a lot simpler. So that's why I was hoping for the other line, because white has a lot, you know, better continuations. So f e5, now I'm basically just losing a piece for no real play. I don't have anything against white's king. If I take this one with check, he can drop back. I think queen g3 is also fine. So yeah, basically anything works here for white. I took this one, bishop takes c6, so now we're down a piece. Check, queen comes back to g3. Actually, king g2 I think was totally playable as well. It looks like black has rook to g8, but unfortunately after rook a7 check, there's no good way to get out of these checks. And even though white's queen is pinned, I'm just losing to rook a8 check next move. In fact, there's even like a nice mate here. Like here, rook a8, king e8. Of course, white can take this one, but rook e8 is much nicer way to finish. Anyways, so that was already working, but yeah, queen g3 is much easier. I played a couple more moves here, but I did have to resign soon, as yeah, just down the piece for no play anymore. The only reason I even kept the game going was I was like thinking I might have some glimmer of like a stalemate chance maybe in this position, because you know I have no pawn move. So if I could find a way to give up all my pieces, maybe I could, maybe there's some stalemate, you know, I could concoct like 1 in a million chance. But I spent a few minutes, saw that there's no hope of a stalemate whatsoever, and yeah, decided to just end it. So really unfortunate game, especially like second loss in a row was painful to accept. But it was a nice game by my opponent. I thought he did play well. I made some serious mistakes, but you know, some big decisions I can learn from. Clearly I didn't have a good feeling for these structures and all these ideas with playing you know, knight to d4 in many cases. And okay, something to learn from for the future. So what can you do? That was round 4. Hopefully I'll see you back for the next recap, and until then, take care.